Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing another commenting on comments where I read through the comments from you folks on past videos, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. There's no mystery. I'm going to comment on the comments and highlight any particularly insightful or like noteworthy comments, and it's just going to be fun. Comment from the mid-year freakout tag. I'm not going to mention who. So I refer to my partner as my partner for many reasons, but I have someone asking about my partner, and like they're asking about my sexuality. So to directly quote, do I mean that I'm gay or something not exactly straight, or am I saying it like a boyfriend? I use partner for many reasons. It is gender neutral so that if I'm speaking with other people and they're not ready to come out to me, or they're not ready to like out themselves in something like a workspace, I have already modeled that language so they can use it too, and they can participate in a conversation without outing themselves. So it's just inclusive language. The second thing is my partner and I have been together for over 10 years. Because we've been together for over 10 years, partner, as in like life partner, more accurately describes our relationship. Like, I also feel like boyfriend and girlfriend are like juvenile. Like I don't know, they feel juvenile to me. And I know that some people really like them. For me, boyfriend and girlfriend always have this, or fiance, always have this really like high school or immature ring to them. Like, no judgment if those are your preferred identifiers for your relationship with another human. Like, fiance is another one that I feel like people are just like so obsessed with their relationship status that when it changes they're like, ah, fiance, ooh, right? Those words are also not words that I'm a fan of. Like, I think in terms of like its connotations, partner, partnership, working together, like I think those are the things that I'm striving for in a relationship. I think it more accurately describes my relationship. And then asking about someone's sexuality is never okay. It's just not cool. You don't do it. You can infer what you would like about my, I guess you can read me how you would like based on my use of this language, my interests, hence why I refer to my partner as my partner. Again, still on the mid-year freakout tag video, Vipke of One Book, One Review has commented about, I think this is in regards to the anticipated reads in the last half of 2020 question, where I talked about how like I'm trying not to anticipate all these reads. I know that she has been working on her physical TBR as well, and so she says, my book buying has changed due to my TBR project as well. I don't pre-order anymore, never was big on that to begin with, and I try not to stock up on more books than I can read. That I mostly read digital these days makes that very easy. And I feel like that's an awesome point that I think, especially with series, for me, sometimes it's very tempting to order all of the books at once, or like book one and book two, so that if I really like book one, I can jump right into book two, or like box sets, right? The shipping of that next book in the series is going to take some time. It's tempting to order things before you actually have the time to read them. But going digital means that you can purchase the book as soon as you finish the book, right? There's no wait time, is what I'm saying. There's no wait time when you read digitally, which is a fantastic point. I wish that I liked digital reading more, because then that would, I think, cut down on a lot of this like anticipation buying, I think. A convincing point for getting into e-reading, Vipke. So thank you for your comment on the Redeath of the Author, which was the Patron's Choice video for June. Anna Clara, oh dear, pronunciation, has left a really beautiful, engaged response. I want to share it with you and like speak to some of these points. So she says, I was thinking about this a few days ago too. I remember that when the news about Dumbledore being gay first came out, I was very angry at J.K. Rowling. If he's gay, why isn't it more explicit in the book? This, along with many other things she said after that, always irked me because I kept thinking that if she wanted to add so much lore to this book, she should have added it to the books. 100%, I agree. Especially because this is such a financially profitable series. J.K. Rowling could have written any number of spin-off books, fleshed out the lore more. They would have been published. Like, J.K. Rowling could probably, well, she has published shit. The Cursed Child, I'm looking at you. But she 100% could publish canonical works that flesh out this world. The fake textbooks, like the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, Quidditch Through the Ages, Tales of the Beetle Bard, like the fake textbooks have become real objects for readers, right? She could have published like an annotated version of Rita Skeeter's book from Deathly Hallows that smears Dumbledore's name, and she could, like, in the same way that Tales of the Beetle Bard has been annotated by Dumbledore and has Dumbledore's footnotes throughout it, worked in his relationship with Grindelwald, right? Like, there are so many other cash grab opportunities to world build in a way that isn't Twitter, that has some sort of editing, whereas there's like no time for reflection, no mediation with Twitter, right? Whereas actually publishing a text would require like long-term thought and careful world building. I've never considered her tweets canon. And then Anna goes on to say, because to me, people shouldn't have to read an interview or follow an author on Twitter to understand their writing, or even have all the pieces of a story. It's unfair and non-inclusive. Exactly. Exactly. And you have to assume that most people aren't going to become super fans. Most people aren't going to go and Google and look at the wiki, right? Most people are going to take the books, and that's where it'll end. So she goes on to say that she has always leaned more towards death of the author herself. Even with authorial intent being taken into consideration, I was always taught that no reading is passive. You're never just consuming information mindlessly. Literature is a conversation, and even when we're just reading, we are actively participating in the text. Yes, 100%. Your experiences, thoughts, and upbringing are going to determine how you interpret a book, and that has value. If a person falls in love with a book because they think it talks about childhood and the loss of it, but this wasn't what the author meant, how can I take that interpretation away from them? Why would the author have any rights once their book is out to determine how you understand something? I think it was John Green who said books belong to their readers. Yes. Yes, 100%. And that was beautifully said. It's inevitable that someday in our journey we'll want to read something that sounds really interesting but was written by someone we can't support. I would, just as you said, like to believe that if the authors are shitty people, this will be apparent in the text. But sometimes it isn't. Which is a good point. I guess I generally assume that an author's politics will appear in their text, but depending on what they're writing, you're right, it might not. We might not know what they're doing in their personal lives. That is a good point. We can't always trust a text to reveal the author's politics. So thank you for your very, very engaged and thoughtful response, Anna. Also on the Death of the Author video, John Schmidt talks about how the author's subconscious might bleed throughout the story, that perhaps even the author had no intention to reveal what, or they weren't even aware of it themselves. So like this is specifically in regards to Tolkien. And so Schmidt talks about how the idea of Bilbo leaving his safe, warm home for an unknown enemy had always struck me as a feeling Tolkien must have had before he went to war. Bilbo signs a waiver or signs up before he undertakes this mortal adventure. While it is fine for Tolkien to say this wasn't the intent of his story, and it may not be, it is an inescapable truth of the memories and feelings these authors inject into what we read. I think that's an interesting point, that I don't know how much in this day queer-coded villains are intentionally malicious and how much it's how we've been conditioned to view gender already, how we're conditioned by our own consumption of media to think of what a good guy looks like versus think of what a bad guy looks like. I think there's so much media baggage. I'm not sure how many authors are actively queer coding villains at this point versus just regurgitating what a villain is in their mind, not realizing that historically villains have been queer coded. Does that make sense? So like I feel like yes, texts definitely, like within the authorial intention approach, there's almost like this like sub layer, I guess, of unconscious bias, unintentional messaging that's in a text. So it's part of that death of the author approach to be like, whether or not they intended this, this is the implication, right? Whether this was a conscious or subconscious choice, this is the impact. This is how it reads. Thank you for mentioning this sort of unintentional authorial baggage that gets mixed into texts. Ooh, this is another interesting point. So Teenan, sorry if I butchered the pronunciation, says, death of the author is just the starting point. And that unfortunately, it also sometimes gets taken to the extreme. Authorial intent is guesswork to a degree, but also very informed by lots of scholarship as well. And they think that in music or art, there's more emphasis on the context in which the artist or composer created. And to me, this greater emphasis adds to the meaning of certain pieces and songs and makes for a richer experience, even if it might be a negative one. So I think you make like such a good point that it's really only in literature that we even try to kill the artist. And so I host a podcast, Wild Sound Civilized, with a friend who is a classically trained musician, and she's a music teacher. My approach and her approach to art is so different, and like some of the things that she talks about in the podcast is the author context and the biography. And it's weird because in other contexts, basically in other disciplines, in fields that are not my own, I am totally willing to look into the artist, and and also at the same time, it just feels so weird. Like we've had discussions, Bailey and I have had discussions where there is such an emphasis in the classic music world of like reproducing things as precisely as intended by the composer. And like there isn't a lot of freedom for interpretation because it's a classic, because it's a classic, because it's a classic. Like you don't seem to have that same freedom for interpretation, right? And I just find it's just such a like diametrically opposite approach. Bailey talked about at one point, I can't remember if it's on the podcast or off the podcast or what episode it is, but at some point she's talked about how in her exams she would have to research the composer and then justify her choice to play a piece in a certain way. So like based on her authorial research, she had to justify her performance. And like that's just such a mind-boggling approach to art. It seems like other disciplines, it's not just that authorial intention is encouraged. It's the rule. You can't stray from authorial intentions in other disciplines, and it's mind-boggling. And like, yes, it adds meaning, but I feel like I'm almost wondering how much it limits meaning, because a lot of classic art and music feels so inaccessible to me as like a layperson. I'm not an expert in that field, but it feels like there's so much I have to take on to access that art. To speak on why Mozart moves me from like a personal experience wouldn't be taken seriously, whereas if I researched him as a human and I talked about his backstory and like his weird interest in farts and like his fart fetish and like that would totally be valid. Like that would be valid to talk about with people in this like art space, but just talking about how my baggage doesn't, I don't know, it's weird. It's so weird, the different ways we approach art. And I really do think we need a more case-by-case balanced approach. Thank you, Tianan, for your comment. I think the critical thinking, the critical engagement with art, or maybe even not critical engagement with art in general is a messy thing. It's a messy thing. And I feel like how we are taught to engage with it really affects how we enjoy it. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of chew on this a little more. I'm not done with this, obviously. Death of the author, authorial intention in various art forms is something that I'm always grappling with. So thank you. On my last commenting on comments video, Paula noticed Schick by Wolfgang Herrndorf. Awkward attempt at German. She asked how my German learning is going. It's going all right. It's slower than I would like. And I think that's because, like, I can devote an hour to German each day. Nobody speaks it back to me. Like, I can watch YouTubers in German, hear it, but I feel like it's not the same. Like, when I was a kid, I lived in Germany with family for a few months. Like, I was 6 when I went. And having grown up with German-speaking grandparents, I could understand everything that everyone was saying to me, but it took me a while to have the confidence to speak back to them. So it was, again, a one-sided conversation where, like, my cousins and my tante would speak in German to me, and then I would reply in English. And it was a huge frustration, especially for my tante, whose English wasn't super good. It was great for my cousins who were practicing their English. They were learning it in school. I think what I need to, like, really build confidence to speak would be to actually go to Germany. Ask the people around me, like, don't speak to me in English. Force me to speak back to you in German or in Denglish. Let me try and muck around with this. And I think the, like, perfectionist in me really wants myself to be, like, more confident and further along in the speaking aspect of things. Like, reading and listening comprehension, I think, are both pretty good. I have a really hard time making the switch from English to German when everything around me is English. I second guess myself a lot. Sometimes something will just come out and then I'm like, is that correct? Is that grammatically correct? Or did I just make, like, a complete garbage pile? So it's all right. Thank you for your question, Paula. This is just a place to land. And that is this, like, weirdly creepy comment. And it's, like, one after the other on the top 10 books of all time Q&A video. And it's just a human asking, are you single? Do you live alone? Like, I am always curious about the comments like this. Has anyone ever found a relationship by leaving a comment like this? Because this reads like this person is maybe trying to come and break into my house and kidnap me and murder me. This goes in the weird file so that if things like this keep happening, I have receipts. I think this is especially important for smallish content creators. Keep things like this. Like, I had a human threaten to kidnap me and keep me in the back of their van and take me on a road trip around the States and do unwanted sexual things to me. That's me sort of paraphrasing and cleaning that up. Most of the time this is probably just, like, empty shit, and part of me wonders if some of these things are deliberately intended to make me uncomfortable, to make me shut up. The dick pic is an attempt at a power move. Like, I don't like what you're saying, so here is the symbol of my male power and privilege. Here is my like, they're trying to end the conversation on their terms because it hasn't gone their way. So, dick and you'll shut up. There are dissertations to be written in here. I am both horrified and fascinated by men on the internet and their interactions with women. Like, I would love to interview some of these people and be like, what did you think you were achieving? I feel like a lot of this has to be either a power play, like, there, I put you in your place. I made you feel uncomfortable. I made you worry for your safety. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Or it's intentional and it's a joke. Did I catch up on the comments? I caught up mostly on the comments. There are things that I just can't go back for, and maybe one day in the future I'll visit some of the older videos, like pick one and just visit all the comments on that and do a video like this. So like, I'm sorry if you've left engaged comments on other videos. Like, I read them as they came in, and oftentimes if you were recommending things, I was adding those to my TBR as I went. I haven't physically responded to them because I was just producing more content than I could physically keep up with. I'm hoping that doing these comment on comment videos more regularly, and there were several responses with folks saying they really liked this style of video because like YouTube hadn't shown them all of the things that I'd produced, and so it sort of highlighted some of the things that I'd made by commenting on the comments. They commented or they watched it, but then they didn't go back to see how other people were responding to it. I would like to continue to do these. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, consider subscribing, consider giving this video a thumbs up. All of my social media is linked in the description box. My podcast, Wild Sounds Civilized, is linked in the description box. We are working on producing more episodes for a second season. Thank you to my patrons for making videos like this possible. Your support, your feedback is super helpful. It's much appreciated. And until next time, happy reading, stay safe, support the Black Lives Matter movement. That's still a thing. It's fallen out of the news cycle, but it's still a thing, and I will leave resources down below. We'll see you soon. Bye.